Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Houston Sports Talk back into the video today, and today we're going to be talking about what I think the Detroit Pistons offseason plan should look like after hiring Monty Williams as their head coach just about a week ago. As you know, it's almost Tuesday. It's about 30 minutes away from Tuesday, and I think Monty was hired on Thursday. Was he hired? Was he hired Tuesday or Wednesday? I think he was hired last Tuesday or last Wednesday. I think it was the day. It was a day or two after Memorial Day, so it was either Tuesday or Wednesday that the Detroit Pistons hired Monty Williams, former Suns head coach, to be their new head coach. Where Monty Williams was also paid a 6-year, $78.5 million deal, which makes him the highest paid coach in the NBA. And not only that, but today they hired Steven Silas, former Houston Rockets head coach, to be one of the top assistants on the Detroit staff. Dwayne Casey is moving to the head coach for last year. Dwayne Casey, Coach of the Year award as well. He's won the Coach of the Year award as well. I think in 2018 he won that year. He won that. They were the 1 seed, but lost in the second round. I think he won that. He won that award in the 2017. Yeah, that was the 2017-18 season. He won the Coach of the Year award for the Raptors. Was the Pistons head coach for since when Blake and Drummond were on the team, and they were like the 8 or 7 seed in the playoffs, which I think that was either the 27. That was the 2018-19 season that Detroit was in the playoffs. I think his first year with the Pistons was the 2018-19 season, and has been the coach ever since then until he wasn't really fired. They parted ways, and he's going into the front office. So Dwayne Casey's moving into the front office. Monty Williams and Steven Silas are in for the coaching staff. And I like what, the directions that are heading in this franchise. Cade Cunningham is going into his third season, which he barely was healthy in his second year. I think he played around 10 to 13 games probably in his second year. Was not healthy at all. He had season-ending injury. Season-ending surgery. He probably could have returned at some point, but the team doctors and the team advised him to have surgery, which he did, and he's going to be ready to go next season. Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren had excellent rookie seasons for the Detroit Pistons, and not only that, but they have the 5th overall pick in this year's draft. They have a lot of cap space, and they are expected to be a team that could be really aggressive in the trade market and free agency, with Monty Williams coming in to be the head coach. This is expected to be a Detroit Pistons team that's going to take a huge jump in the standings last year. Last year being the worst team in the NBA, being the 15th seed. I could see this team, trying to be play-in competitive possibly next year if they make the right moves. And let's talk about what I think the Detroit Pistons should do. I think the biggest thing for the Detroit Pistons getting started is trades. Let's talk about some trade assets they have. Alec Burks, if they accept his team option, which he has a $10.4 million team option, which Alec Burks has some trade value. I accept that team option. They also have a team option on Isaiah Stewart. I accept that as well. It's another trade piece. Bojan Bogdanovic as well. Averaged 21.5 points last season. Shot amazing from 3. He is their biggest trade piece by far. Marvin Bagley III. I think there's a shot they keep him. He started at the power forward most of the time for this. Most of the season he started at power forward for them. I think there's a solid chance he gets moved. I don't know though. So they got Bagley, you got Bogdanovic and Burks trade pieces. Killian Hayes, who was the 8th overall pick in 2020. He's a potential guy to potentially be moved. Same thing for Isaiah Stewart. I've heard some stuff about James Wiseman. I don't see it. I think there are probably a couple other names out on this Pistons roster that are potentially tradable. Got a lot of trade pieces. They also have some decent first-round picks to maybe potentially move. They have a early second round. They have the first pick in the second round, which is the 31st pick in the draft. And if you're having the first pick in the first 5 picks in the first 5 picks in the second round, I mean, you could find a really decent first round talent. If you draft right and you find the right guy, you could have a potential talent, first round talent. Maybe someone slipped off someone's board. Maybe someone falls to the second round. This is early second round. This is first pick of the second round. That could be a decent pick. And with Troy Weaver being the GM, a smart GM, he's developed this team well. He's been a really, really good GM. I think probably one of the best GM, besides the Thunder GM. I think Troy Weaver is definitely up there, probably in the top 10 of GMs in the NBA. He's been really good for them in this rebuild. You should be able to find someone good at 31 if they don't trade that pick. But let's get into some trades I think is best for the Pistons to make during this offseason. And I got two. So the first one I make is to get a point guard off the bench. You got R.J. Hampton. You have Killian Hayes. But I think with a Monty Williams team, I think he wants this team to be better. And that's why I have the Detroit Pistons making a trade with the San Antonio Spurs to land a really, really good backup shooting point guard, which kind of played a little bit of starting shooting guard last year for the Spurs. Played backup point guard and shooting guard with the Pelicans, and didn't really play a lot, but then got traded to the Spurs for Josh Richardson and started playing way more, started playing way better, averaged 12 points per game last year. Devonte Graham, a really excellent shooter, a really decent point guard / shooting guard, would be an excellent piece for the Detroit Pistons. Let's talk about what a trade would look like to land the Pistons Devonte Graham. So here's what would get Devonte Graham to the Detroit Pistons. Send Killian Hayes and Isaiah Stewart to the Detroit Pistons. Isaiah Stewart, yes, he had a really solid year, but you're not really looking at him having a big year with San Antonio. He'd be the backup center for San Antonio next season, which definitely puts his role down from what it was before. And not only that, but he's an expiring contract the next year, so he's not worth that much. Now, Killian Hayes, he's been a failure. He averaged, I think, around 11 points per game last year, but on horrible shooting. He's a horrible player, and he's not that worth much. You can get a solid player back for him, and I think you'd probably also have to send a 2024 second-round pick that belongs to Memphis. So, in that case, Detroit gets Devonte Graham from the Spurs, and the Pistons send Killian Hayes and Isaiah Stewart and a 2024 second-round pick that belongs to the Memphis Grizzlies. Then the second trade I have the Detroit Pistons making. Listen, Monty Williams, he's the coach. They got a young squad. They got a really hell of a team. Before I get in this big trade for the Pistons, I'm going to go into who I think the Pistons draft with the 5th overall pick. And that I have being Jarace Walker from Houston. Big fan of Jarace Walker, obviously as a Cougars fan. And loved watching him here. He's an excellent scorer, excellent shot blocker, which him and Jalen Duren would work amazing together. Him and Jalen Duren would be amazing together. I mean, amazing on the back in the back court. I mean, the front court. Sorry. So those two would be a beast at the 4 and the 5. So I think if they draft Jarace Walker, I don't think they trade the pick. So Jarace goes to the Pistons, and then you're kind of looking for a small forward. And I think one candidate is to sign Jeremy Grant. We've heard that name as Jeremy Grant potentially going back to the Pistons, where he played in the 2021 season. I'm not saying it's impossible because I really think it could happen, but I don't see it happening. I don't know where Grant goes. I honestly have I think I could see Cleveland being an option for him. I think Detroit is one of the top candidates. I don't see it happening. I see Detroit making a huge trade to land two-time All-Star Brandon Ingram of the New Orleans Pelicans. And let's get into what a trade would look like to land the Pistons' Brandon Ingram. So the Pelicans would send Alec Burks, Bojan Bogdanovic, Marvin Bagley, the 31st overall pick in this year's draft, which is like basically another first-round pick. It's basically, it's the second-round pick, but that's the first pick in the second round. If the Pelicans GM drafts right, he's getting like another first-round talent. So the 31st overall pick and 2 other first-round picks. A 2025 first-round pick that belongs to Detroit and a 2029 first-round pick that belongs to Detroit. So Bojan Bogdanovic, Alec Burks, Marvin Bagley III, 2025 first, 2029 first, and the 31st overall pick in this year's draft to the New Orleans Pelicans. And then the Pistons get Brandon Ingram, and they also get Garrett Temple for cap spaces. Garrett Temple's a nice veteran point guard / shooting guard, but was horrible this season, barely played, only averaged 2 points. I don't know what happens with him in the Pistons. I most likely think he probably gets cut. Most likely probably does get cut for the Pistons, but if not, he's like their 11th or 12th man in that situation. He's gonna be doing the same thing he did for the Pelicans. Nothing. But most likely, I think the Pistons would probably waive or cut him. But who knows? Maybe use him as a extra shooter off the bench as the 11th or 12th man. Who knows with Garrett Temple? So, recap of the trade: Alec Burks averaged 13 points per game with 41% three-point shooting. Bojan Bogdanovic averaged 21.5 points per game this season. Marvin Bagley averaged 12 points per game, and I think he averaged around 6 or 7 rebounds per game this season. And 2 first-round picks, 2025 and 2029, and the 31st overall pick in this year's draft, and then Brandon Ingram and Garrett Temple to the Detroit Pistons. So then your starting lineup looks completely different. Well, not completely different. It looks completely better, but not that completely different. I guess it would be completely different than last year because Cade wasn't really starting that much last year because he was injured. And Brandon Ingram would be new. Jarice Walker would be new. The only real starters from last year would be Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren. And Jalen Duren didn't really starting till like probably around 45, 50 games in. So in that case, it would be basically a new starting lineup for this Detroit Pistons roster. But so moving on from the trades and the starting lineup, let's get into free agency. Because if you look at off the bench for the Detroit Pistons after you make those trades, you don't have a lot of players off the bench. Here, if you don't make any moves in free agency and you only make those 2 trades, which is very unrealistic and won't happen, here would be the players off the bench: James Wiseman, Devonte Graham, Garrett Temple, RJ Hampton. Those would be the best players for the Detroit Pistons off the bench. So you have to make some moves in free agency. In that case, I have the Detroit Pistons making 2 really huge moves in free agency. Get one of the guys who was incredible off the bench for the Cavaliers off the bench last year, and that is Caris LeVert. You have some money to spend. Even if you trade for Brandon Ingram, you still have a decent amount of money to spend. You have some good cap space. You can afford Caris LeVert. Whether he's asking $10 or $12 million a year, so maybe you sign him to let's say a 2-year, $25 million deal or a 3-year, $36 or $37 million deal. It's definitely worth it. You add him off the bench with Devonte Graham and James Wiseman, and then this other move I have the Pistons making in free agency would make their roster or bench even better. And that's another name that the Pistons are also expected to be linked to this free agency, and that is Matisse Thybulle. Played for the Sixers and played for both the Sixers and the Blazers this year. Played way better with the Blazers, but mainly played for the Sixers. Was traded to the Blazers in a 3-team trade at the was that a 3? I think it was a 3-team trade at the deadline. Did really well with the Blazers. I think he was starting at the power forward position for them most of the year at the end of the year, and was really solid. A solid defender, decent shooter, decent scorer. Mainly a really good defender. Wouldn't be cheap, but wouldn't be too expensive. I think probably around $7 million a year. Maybe a 3-year, $23 million deal, or 3-year. Yeah. Now I'm gonna go with the 3-year, $28 million deal. Probably sounds fair for Thybulle. And then that would basically complete the team. So you would be looking at a roster that looks like the starting point guard Jaden Ivey, the starting shooting guard Cade Cunningham, small forward Brandon Ingram, power forward Jarice Walker, center Jalen Duren, 6th man Caris LeVert, 7th man Devonte Graham, 8th man Matisse Thybulle, 9th man James Wiseman, 10th man RJ Hampton, and then the 11th man would be Garrett Temple. And I don't really know about the 12th or 13th. That's a decent roster for a team who was had the worst record in basketball last season. It's not that bad. Honestly, with this team, everybody stays healthy. Cade stays healthy. B.I. stays healthy. Jaden stays healthy. Jarice Walker has a good rookie year. Duren continues to improve. The bench does well and is efficient with LeVert, Graham, Thybulle, and Wiseman. I think you're looking at an 8 or 7 seed right there with that Pistons team. If they stay healthy, play efficient basketball, that is a nice young roster. Really, really nice young roster there. I don't know. I think there's some maybes in this. I think the biggest maybe is the Brandon Ingram trade, because I think it's very possible maybe the Pistons end up, not trading for Brandon Ingram and sign Jeremy Grant, which is another really deep possible idea. Or maybe if the Pelicans are doing a trade with the Pistons, maybe they ask for the 5th overall pick. There's a lot of maybes with this Pistons offseason. I think definitely free agent candidates for the Pistons. The top 3 right now I think have to be Jeremy Grant, Matisse Thybulle, and Karis LeVert as of right now. I've also heard Dillon Brooks could be a potential option. With what that sounds to me like is that they're trying to add in defensive players. Matisse Thybulle, Dillon Brooks, Matisse Thybulle, Dillon Brooks, and who was the other name? Jeremy Grant are all good, really, really good defenders. Really, really good defenders. So hearing those names, Thybulle, Brooks, and Grant, sounds like they are looking to add in defensive help, and they desperately need that as well. So that's why I think you trade for Brandon Ingram. Not the best of a defender, but you add in Thybulle, and who knows? It could be better for them to add in. It could be better for them to add in, Jeremy Grant than Brandon Ingram, but who knows? You guys you're upgrading the defense with adding in Jarice Walker. You're upgrading the defense with adding in Matisse Thybulle. Karis LeVert's also a decent defender as well. Cade's also a really solid defender. You're getting him back. The Detroit Pistons were a horrible defense last year. I think their defense would definitely be improving with Thybulle and Walker. But you guys have more thoughts on the offseason idea. That's for the video. If you guys enjoyed, and peace out.